Stampede, the pun is strong with this one. It's a game about collecting stamps, but the stamps represent animals, hence Stampede. I can't escape the feeling that if this game came out in the 1970s, it would be called Safari, and it would just be about collecting animals' heads, but now we know better. It's about collecting representations of animals' heads. It is a card game. The main element of the game is this deck of cards. Each card shows you the icon of an animal on top and an action in the bottom half of the card. You shuffle these cards at the beginning of the game. Each player receives 2 cards randomly placed face up. 2 random cards, they are placed face up in front of themselves. They represent their starting album. Then each player also receives a hand of 3 cards. Also, there's the card there. All it does is to mark an area called the exchange area. At the beginning of the game, you draw 3 random cards and you place them there. They represent the exchange area. That will be useful for game purposes. Another interesting element is the back of the cards. Each card back shows you 2 animal icons, and they are printed everywhere, so that no matter how you're holding the card, that is visible, so that you can get a sense of what the opponent may have in their hand. Because of these 2 icons, one represents the animal on the other side. So that's really cool. And as you see, for game purposes, this could be important. The gameplay is extremely simple. Players will alternate taking turns. During your turn, you will draw a card from the deck. Then you will play a card into your album. If it is an animal that you don't have yet, it goes next to the other ones. If it is an animal that you already have, then you place it together with the other copies of the same animal, sorting them by type. This is the general idea. You play a card into your album, and then you resolve the action indicated in the icon there. And so you need to learn a little bit of iconese here, but there aren't too many symbols, too many things to worry about. When you play the crocodile, for example, you exchange your hand with the hand of an opponent, and that's why looking at the back and getting a sense of what they may have is very important. After you play the elephant, you trade a card from your hand with a card from your own album. Lion, you trade a card from your album with a card from someone else's album. Here you trade a card from your hand with a card in the exchange area, so you switch them that way. Here a card from the exchange area, between your exchange area and your album. And hand and your album, your hand and someone else's album. And before I explain what the parrot does, let me tell you what the victory conditions are. So this is the idea. You play a card, resolve what it does, and then you go around like this. The first player to collect a copy of each animal or 5 copies of the same animal wins the game. The exception is the parrot. If you collect 4 of these guys, then you win the game. To balance that power, they actually don't have an action that you resolve. This is simply a reminder that you can win with 4 parrots, otherwise it takes 5 of any other kind of animal. Well, here you exchange your entire hand with cards from the deck. And this is how you play Stampede. Stampede, it's a very peculiar game. It's very simple, and it seems overblown at first sight. At least that was my impression. The game is so simple, but then you had to remember all of those unique effects, which is fine, but then even more complicated, you had to figure out what the heck to do with them. Because even when you know what the cards do, then you're still playing in what appears to be a very chaotic way. It's hard for you to plan ahead because you only have your cards, somebody takes them from you, and everything is constantly changing, especially if you play with more than 2 players. Then what our players are doing changes all the time. So it is a game that I don't think is going to be love at first sight for most people that are still going to enjoy it. I enjoyed it, but it took me a couple of plays. The first play, just to make sure I knew the icons and what they do, and then my opponents also, my daughters, knew what those did. I must say they did a good job here with the icons. They're particularly readable. So one play to make sure we know what the icons do, but then a couple of plays for everybody to really figure out how to do things with them, which is not the same thing. And so to realize that the lion is particularly powerful, that, oh, there is a reason why those symbols are on the back, so that's when I'm going to exchange cards in a certain way. And then after a while, what really emerges was really is important that gives the game its flavor, in my opinion, is the diplomacy, is the diplomatic element. I don't think I would want to play this game with 2 players. Then it would be just too much tug of war. I do to you what you do to me, and that's it. Rather, uh-oh, she's 1 or 2 cards away from completing that thing. What are we gonna do together? I'm gonna take this card, and then I'm gonna mess things up this and that way. To me, that elevates the game to a whole other level from what otherwise appears to be just a very weird and messy experiment in chaos. You still have that element that you're not in control, that things change around you all the time, there's a lot of luck, or what I call functional luck, which is things I can't predict. They're determined by other players, but I can predict, I can control them, and for all intents and purposes, it's just as if I rolled a die from the way I perceive it and that I have to deal with. So, it's chaotic in the sense that everything changes, so many possibilities. If you're playing with young players, they are confused about the strategy, and so they're even more unpredictable than if you play with adults. And maybe you, like me, in times of pandemic, you play with your kids more, and with your adult friends not as much. So Stampede is a weird game there because it has the complexity of rules that you can expect from a family game, with all those effects, maybe not a pure children game, but a family game, and yet at the same time, the strategy takes a while to emerge. And even then, I would say it's part of the fun, the fact that there are so many different paths to victory, and so you had to adjust to each time that you play, the different strategies that people pursue. But when you see 2 parrots, then you're going to start ganging up against whoever has those, or 3 lions, or things like that. So the for the game to really show its potential, it takes some work and it takes some patience. Even then, it's fun. It's not that it blew me away, but I did find it entertaining to try to manipulate the politics around the table so that we would gang up against somebody, but at the same time, I tried to keep a combo in mind and in my hand so that then I could quickly complete my collection and win the game. And I like the fact that there is a mounting sense of excitement, because even if the game is pretty messy and people don't really see what the heck they're doing, cards are added to the albums all the time, and so chances are that after a while you do see people progressing towards victory. It's not as satisfying if in fact you don't really know how the heck you got there, but after a couple of plays, again, you'll be able to see the general strategy and adapt it to the situation, and so that will be fun and rewarding. So it's a light game, or it's a game with light rules, but fairly convoluted and chaotic strategy. But maybe you played Flux, so you're okay with that kind of game. But this is something different. It's its own beast, no pun intended, but it's a game with simple rules, a chaotic strategy that takes a while to emerge, and that maybe somebody will never really get to enjoy and appreciate. I don't think it's a game for everybody because of this peculiar element. I don't think it's a universal crowd pleaser. In my family, it worked, and now, we put in the homework to learn the rules and the strategy, so I think we're gonna keep playing it. Stampede, about stamps and animals and chaos.